months ago, I woke one morning in my London home to a series of missed calls on my phone. They were from Nigeria. It was the news that the police in Lagos has invaded a party and has arrested 42 men on the grounds of homosexuality. The arrest that morning was not actually the first. It was one in line of many other arrests of gay and bisexual men across Nigeria by the Nigerian police since 2014, the year Nigerians signed the Same-Sex Marriage Prohibition Act into law by President Goodluck Jonathan. The law criminalizes, among other things, setting up and registration of gay clubs and associations, same-sex marriage, aiding and abetting homosexual marriage, identity and behavior, directly or indirect show of same-sex harmonious affection in public. I'm a Nigerian. I'm living with HIV. And my life has been a struggle. A struggle knowing that all of these acts will carry 10 to 14 years imprisonment. But the interesting thing is, out of all the fortunate events in my life, many of them have been by accident. An accident that have been exciting and amazing. I came in contact with Mr. Vandross in 2009, an encounter that has left me with unspeakable strength and power. But most importantly, an encounter that has made me an angelic troublemaker. My journey with Mr. Rustin started when I was a columnist with Gay Star News. I was commissioned to write a story on historical Black LGBT people in history for the LGBT History Month, which is always in February in the UK. Prior to this, my understanding of Blackness and queerness have been shaped within victimhood. In 2005, when I started the independent project, which is now known as the Initiative for Equal Rights in Nigeria, I did so in response as a victim. In 2007, when my house was broken into, and I was almost killed because I have the nerve to come out and challenge the government, I ran out of Nigeria as a victim. When I was 17 years old, after a week-long gay therapy session, I came back from school, went into the bathroom, tied a rope around my neck, and for the first time in my life, attempted suicide. I did so as a victim. When in 2008, on the street of London, I heard someone use the N-word at me and tell me to go back to where you came from. Or when I see an act of racism and I lack the courage or the language to call it out, I did so as a victim. My victimhood was rooted in my lack of access to history, of people like me. I was only gay when I was 32 years. Even at that time, I had no idea what it means to be gay. I was never Black. I was only a Yoruba man from Nigeria. So, with my brief from Gay Star News, I sat in front of my computer and started searching for those historic Black queer people. And I'll be very honest with you, before I started, I was expecting to see about 3 or 5, if I get lucky. Then, I came across Linda Bellows, the first Black lesbian politician in the UK, and the founder of the Black History Month. I saw Alice Walker, the Pulitzer winner for a book, Color Purple. Then I came across Audre Lorde, a Canadian-American writer and a civil rights movement leader. And she was really active in the LGBT movement in the Greenwich Village in New York. And also, her poem has focused on the history of women. I came across Bruce Nugent, a writer and painter of the Harlem Renaissance, and his short story, Smoke, Lilies, and Jade, had been regarded by many as the first publication that actually talked about homosexuality amongst Black Americans. Then I saw James Baldwin, the legendary James Baldwin, who has written a lot about the intersectionality between race and sexuality. But more importantly, the writer of I Am Not Your Negro. Then there was Luther Vandross, the man who serenades us with his amazing voice and lyrics. And I always argue with my friends. All of us have got something to thank Mr. Luther for. And then there was Tracy Chapman, the singer-songwriter who has won many Grammy Awards. Then I saw RuPaul Drag Race, the drag queen who is doing so much to break down the glass ceilings of what it means to be a man. And then there was John Amaechi, the first openly NBA player. There was Samuel Nkoli, the South African political activist and an HIV activist, and the first person to actually form the first gay group in the whole of Africa. Then, my lovely sister, Miss Phil, the openly gay woman who had wowed the LGBT landscape in the UK and the founder of the LGBT history, of the Black Pride in the UK. As I dug deeper, I got more excited. Here I was at the age of 34 and a gay rights activist. And it has taken me this long to actually know I was standing on the shoulders of big black giants, people who had gone before me, who had lived their authentic lives so that I can find myself and love myself. However, it was being Rustin that changed everything. I realized that as far back as the 50s, there was a man who was defying all the odds and understanding the act of intersectional living. Bayard was not only a black man in a Jim Crow America that prided itself on racial segregation and hatred. He was also an openly gay man in a homophobic America that prided itself on its bigotry. I was like a child in a candy shop. I was excited, I was happy, I was empowered. I came to realize that Rustin faced a lot of prejudice from not just the American system, but from the black community itself. That while the FBI were blackmailing him and using his sexuality to shut him up for his fight against a racialized America, the black community were turning their backs against him because of his sexuality. But no, Rustin is not one to keep quiet. Leading up to the March on Washington, more than 50 years ago, he was asked to leave the movement by Dr. Reverend Martin Luther King because of a threat from the White House and from the FBI. But the movement could not find their voice without Rustin. So he was called back to lead the greatest human rights march in the history of the civil rights movement in the US, the March on Washington. It was here that Dr. Reverend Martin Luther King gave his speech, "I have a dream." Rustin was also influential in introducing a non-violent direct action to the civil rights movement in America. I became extremely fascinated with the story of Rustin. And in every way, I saw my life connecting with his even before I came in contact with him. As I read more about him, I came across one of his most powerful quotes. We need in every bay and community a group of angelic troublemakers. From this quote, I realized that I did not have to be a victim. Even when I felt like a victim, that I was never a victim. I was actually an angelic troublemaker. Being an actor was all I had wanted to be. I had my big break, and 6 months later, I was looking at losing it all. I had a choice to either come out, kill myself, or go into hiding. I decided to come out. This made me the first person to come out on national television in a country of over 100 million people. My coming out started a conversation the country had been dreading to have. I opened a can of worms. I became an angelic troublemaker. Later, when I settled in the UK, Rustin Code formed the core of my activism in my fight against institutional racism, sexism, ableism, homophobia, biphobia, and transphobia. But more importantly, When I became aware of it, the code formed the bedrock of the formation of the Bisi Alimi Foundation. I had in my mind accelerating social acceptance of LGBT people in Nigeria. Like Desmond Tutu, I know that I am a prisoner of hope. I strongly believe that change is inevitable, but it is our responsibility to accelerate change. Nigeria was my bay, was my community. I wanted to empower a mass of people that would not only believe in social justice and human rights, but wanted to fight for it as well, like those people that marched on Washington for jobs and housing. So in 2015, in partnership with the Initiative for Equal Rights, we commissioned NOI, Nigerians' leading opinion poll, to carry out a study on social acceptance of same-sex marriage law in Nigeria. Earlier in 2004, NOI had done the same poll, and I found that 96% of Nigeria would support a law that would criminalize same-sex relationship. When we did that study, it fell to 87%. Many of you will argue that this is not a big drop, but for many lesbian, gay, bisexual, and trans people in Nigeria, this is a huge achievement. It means that the angelic troublemakers across the bays and communities in Nigeria, who had been quiet for a long time, are now being heard loud and clear. Though, when we did our study, not dancing to their music, the effect of homophobia, biphobia, and transphobia on the life of LGBT people, a study that sampled over 400 LGBT people in Nigeria via an online sampling, the story was different. 55% of our respondents said they have been sexually abused and assaulted. 54% said they experienced threats and violence online. 71% said they strongly believe that this experience is based on their sexuality. Prior to this study, we assumed that curative and corrective rape was a South African thing. We were shocked when a lot of lesbians told us that they've been raped by friends or family members with the hope of correcting them. Over 20% of our respondents talked about experiencing discrimination at work or even in the public space. Or when you see me as a Black person, and you see the images every day of Trevor Martin, Eric Garner, Sandra Brand, the 12-year-old Tamir Rice, or Philando Castile, and many others like me. These were men and women who had been killed in broad daylight for being Black. This year alone, according to the Human Rights Watch, over 20 Black trans women have been killed in the United States alone. You watch the news and you see the devastation humans cause, or the effect of climate change. Or you hear about how hypermasculinity is pushing our men to either commit suicide or become domestic abusers. You see how protectionism, populism, and nationalism is changing the face of our politics. When you're confronted with reality like this, then you know you have no choice but to be an angelic troublemaker. You can ask, what can I do differently? How can I make a change? Does it even matter? When at a young age, I was losing my friends to AIDS, and I was confused, I was scared. I knew something had to be done. I just didn't know what. When I was attacked in my home, and I was almost killed, I knew something had to be done, but I don't know how. And when I knew, I don't think I could do it. When I was called a nigger on the streets of London, or attacked for being gay, I was angry, I was confused, I was paranoid, and I didn't know what to do. But when I came across Vandross, I saw the need for an angelic troublemaker, one that is devoted to making changes happen, the force for good and progress in every bay and community, the mobilizers, the organizer, for a different world that is possible, a world that has diversity, equity, and inclusion as its modus operandi. It was this that led me to start the Bisi Alimi Foundation and starting a media and legal fellowship in Nigeria. It informs our culturally sensitive workplace diversity and inclusion, even in a setting like Nigeria. It was this that made me get on a plane and went to my birth country last month to stand in solidarity with the 42 men that were arrested, even when I knew that it was dangerous. Now the men are caught up in the never-ending legal system in Nigeria. It was this that made me say I do to my husband when I know that this will anger so many people who feel that our love is illegal. Being an angelic troublemaker means you're not comfortable with the status quo. It means that you're not waiting around for someone to fix the problems. It means that you live your life with the words of Margaret Mead. Never doubt that a group of smart, thoughtful, committed individuals can change the world. Indeed, it is the only thing that ever has. As an angelic troublemaker, you know that your freedom is not an absolute if your neighbors have none. You know you are the change you're looking for. I am Bisi Alimi, and I am an angelic troublemaker. Thank you.